What could happen to Jamie Spears when this conservatorship is over? Well, let's break it down. My name is Christopher Melcher. I'm a California attorney, and my passion is about making legal issues easy to understand. A lot of us have been thinking about what kind of charges or remedies could be held against Jamie Spears when the conservatorship has ended, because Britney says she wants her dad charged with conservatorship abuse. And I've been thinking about what she means by that, what could happen in court. There could be criminal and civil exposure to Jamie for what he's done, and I'm going to compare and contrast the two. A criminal case can only be brought by the prosecutor. It's typically investigated by the police, presented to the prosecution for charges, and the prosecutor cannot bring criminal charges against somebody unless they have a good faith belief that they can secure a conviction. It's a high standard and it's hard to do. And most importantly, we don't have control over that as citizens. It's totally in the hands of a prosecutor whether to bring charges, what charges will be filed, and then even the plea bargaining that's done, the victim doesn't have much of a say at all. Compare that to civil, where it's the injured party that's bringing the lawsuit, so they're in control of when it's brought, what kind of thing is sued for, and certainly settlement. So that's better than a criminal case because Britney would have control. However, at the moment, she doesn't have the right to sue. That's one of the liberties that was taken from her. Her conservator has the right to sue, and certainly Jamie's not going to sue himself. So it would either have to be the successor conservator, hopefully this Joshua Rubin that's appointed, might sue Jamie, or when the conservatorship is ended, Britney can file it in her own name and she would have control over that. Then there's the penalties, punishments that could happen. Certainly in a criminal case, there could be fines and imprisonment. Unfortunately, where we're at here in Los Angeles County is that people even committing violent crime are not being put into jail. So to me, it's a far-fetched idea to think that Jamie Spears, even if charges were filed and a conviction was secured, that he would do any jail time. Sorry to say that, just being realistic, probably not happening. But in civil, he can be held accountable for all the financial losses and harm that Britney has suffered over the last 13 years. And that could be a staggering amount of money. And as we're going to talk about at the end of this video, there is a bond that she could collect against. So to me, I'd much rather see Britney recover the money than try and chase him around thinking that he might go to jail. She can never get her 13 years back, but she could get her money back and make him pay. And then finally, there's a difference in proof that's required for a civil versus a criminal case. We all know that a criminal case, the burden of proof that the prosecution has to meet is beyond a reasonable doubt, and that there's a presumption of innocence for the accused. Compare that to a civil case. There's no presumption that anyone is guilty or not in a civil case. And the burden of proof is what we call a preponderance of the evidence. And what that means is that the plaintiff's case has to be more likely than not to be true compared to the defendant's defenses. So another way of looking at it, if you had the scales of justice and you had Britney's case on one side and Jamie's defenses on the other, Britney's case would just have to have just a slightly more weight to it than Jamie's case for the jury to find in favor of Britney. So it's a much easier standard of proof to meet. With the vote of the jury, in a criminal case, it's unanimous. All 12 in a California jury have to vote for conviction. But in a civil case, only 9 of 12, a supermajority. So we'll put up here on a scoreboard why I think the civil case is the way to go. Britney's going to have control over bringing the civil case, whereas she would have no control in the criminal action. The remedies are more effective in the civil action than or likely to happen in a criminal case. And then it's much easier to prove the civil case than it is a criminal one. So let's talk about how to sue Jamie Spears. He has a fiduciary duty, which is the highest duty one can have towards another under the law. And he volunteered for that when he applied for and was granted this conservatorship over Britney. He placed himself as a fiduciary, which means that it's the most trusted position in law, that he has to serve Britney's best interests at all times in everything that he does, and he cannot do anything that benefits himself personally. And we certainly have seen examples where he hasn't acted that way, but what he's supposed to do is serve only her best interests. He has to act with absolute honesty, integrity, and good faith. He has to give a full disclosure of all transactions that he's made as conservator and keep and produce records for those transactions. The duty is similar to what an attorney would have to a client, a banker would have to a customer, or a trustee would have to a beneficiary. These are all fiduciary relationships. They're well defined under the law, and no messing around is allowed. Jamie, of course, will have and raise defenses. The first one he's going to raise is consent. He's going to say that Britney's attorney approved all of these transactions and therefore she can't complain. And ordinarily that would be a powerful and probably fatal defense for Britney's case. However, the attorney here wasn't her attorney. It was a court-appointed attorney, Samuel Ingham, who I don't believe ever properly was appointed because Britney had no say in this. It was done without notice to her. And when her chosen attorney, Adam Streisand, came to court, the judge wouldn't appoint that person. So I don't believe that Sam Ingham really had proper authority over her anyway. Secondly, Jamie's going to say that these transactions were approved by the court. That would ordinarily relieve him of responsibility. However, Probate Code Section 2103 says that there is no defense for a conservator if the court approved a transaction as a result of fraud or conspiracy. And the Probate Code Section 2103 says that would include an omission of a material fact. Jamie had an obligation to inform the court of all material facts regarding the transactions for which he sought approval. And if he left any out, the court's approval is not effective and is not a defense pursuant to Probate Code Section 2103. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing Britney coming back, or Britney's lawyer coming back, and saying that all these court approvals are meaningless because Jamie didn't give full disclosure of all the facts and essentially tricked the court, and any approval that her court-appointed attorney made were ineffective because that attorney was never properly appointed to represent her interests. In particular, I'm concerned about some transactions that Jamie engaged in with Britney's estate, meaning Britney's money. He purchased some property in Louisiana from Britney. There was no reason for him to buy that property. Now, he presented that to the court and the court approved it, but did he disclose all the material facts surrounding the transaction? It's pretty hard to do, so my bet would be that he didn't. And honestly, the court should have removed him right when he even proposed that transaction because, again, as a fiduciary, Jamie cannot benefit from this conservatorship and he cannot engage in self-dealing. He can't do any transaction that benefits himself personally. So that should have been a gigantic red flag to the court, but it didn't catch it. There was also a transaction where he leased some property to the estate. And again, there's no reason for him leasing his own property to the estate. If the estate needed to lease property, they could lease it from somebody else. And it was terrible judgment on Jamie's part to even ask that he engage in this self-interested transaction. And again, a huge red flag that the court should have seen. If it's determined that Jamie breached his fiduciary duty, there are powerful remedies against that. All financial harm that resulted from the breach of fiduciary duty, he is responsible for paying back. Probate Code Section 2401.3 says that any loss or damage caused by a breach of fiduciary duty will be charged against the conservator, meaning they have to pay that back, including interest. And you think about 13 years of interest on some of these transactions, it's going to be a gigantic amount of money. Now, the best thing about this story is that there's a bond on Jamie as a conservator for about $48 million. The law says that a conservator has to post a bond to guarantee that there will be a pot of money available to recover if something like this happens. So it's like the one thing I can think of that the court did right in this case. It made him post a bond. Misconduct or breaches of fiduciary duty are absolutely covered by this bond. And I would hate to be this bond company right now, because when Britney makes a claim, and if she's successful in it, the bond company has to pay Britney. And it's a lot of money, and maybe even cover everything that she is out. And that was the best part of the story for me, because going and chasing after Jamie to collect a judgment, he may have blown all this money or hidden it. It'd be very difficult to recover. And Britney might just wind up with a piece of paper that says he's ordered to pay and she could never collect it. Well, the bond will cover that. And that'll be a fantastic source of recovery for her. And the bond company would then sue Jamie to get its money back. It's called subrogation. And if the damages that Britney suffered are higher than $48 million, she can still sue for the whole amount. So if the jury says that Jamie owes her $100 million, the bond company would have to pay $48, and Britney could go after Jamie for the other $52 million if it was available. It's possible that Jamie could try and bankrupt any excess judgment, but the bankruptcy court can also say, no, we're not going to discharge debts that were incurred through misconduct. Of course, there's other people she can sue, and I may make videos about that, like Sam Ingham. I've also heard people say, can she sue the court? I may talk about that separately. I am concerned about that bond being released because it happened when a prior co-conservator, Andrew Wallet, stepped down. He also had a bond of about $48 million. And he negotiated terms to leave, which I think were totally improper for him to do. But they paid him money to leave. And again, may do a whole other video on this one, but they paid him money to leave. They gave him a full release of all claims, including unknown claims, meaning things that they didn't even know happened. They were released Wallet from and exonerated the bond, meaning let the bond company off the hook. And Britney's attorney approved the release of Wallet and Wallet's bond company, and so did the court. It's so disappointing that that happened. Why? But we have another shot at this with Jamie because he still has the bond against him. I'm hoping that Britney's attorney makes a claim against Jamie's bond right now and opposes any release of claims or any exoneration of that bond. That absolutely needs to stay in place, even when Jamie's removed, as the only source of recovery for Britney. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you have other ideas on ones that you want to hear, just drop them in the comments, and I'll see you next time.